Christmas morning smelled like cinnamon, pine, and disappointment. I'd spent the whole night before polishing the small wooden train I'd carved for my grandson, Liam. My hands shook a little from the cold, but mostly from excitement. It had been a long time since I'd seen real joy on that boy's face. When I arrived at my daughter's house, everything was picture perfect, at least from the outside. The white porch wrapped around the front, Christmas lights blinking in harmony, and a brand new SUV parked neatly in the driveway. I stood there for a few seconds, clutching my old leather bag filled with gifts, trying to shake off the cold and the nervous feeling crawling up my chest. Inside, laughter and music filled the air. "Dad, you made it," my daughter, Monica, said as she rushed to open the door. She was wearing a sparkling red dress, holding a glass of champagne. Behind her, her husband, Todd, was busy unboxing a huge gaming console for Liam. I smiled, stepping in. Wouldn't miss it for the world. The house felt like a magazine cover. Expensive, spotless, lifeless. My grandkids, Liam and Emma, barely looked up when I walked in. Their eyes were glued to the screens of their new tablets. I set my bag beside the Christmas tree, noticing that their presents were stacked high. Expensive toys, electronics, designer boxes with glossy ribbons. My simple brown packages looked out of place beneath all that glitter. We had dinner first. I sat quietly, listening to stories I couldn't relate to, their vacation plans, stock investments, new gadgets. Every few minutes, someone scrolled through their phone. When I tried to ask Liam about school, he shrugged. Emma giggled when I accidentally dropped my fork. Finally, Monica clapped her hands. "Okay, time for presents." Everyone gathered near the tree, excitement buzzing in the air. I waited patiently as they tore through gift after gift. Laughter, squeals, paper flying everywhere. Then, it was my turn. I cleared my throat. "I made something for you all," I said softly, pulling out the first small box. It was wrapped in plain brown paper with a red ribbon. "These are from me. Took me a few months to finish." Liam ripped his open first, a small wooden train, polished and hand-carved, with little initials engraved on the bottom. "LJ, Grandpa loves you." He stared at it for a moment, then his lips curled. "It's the toy? Like made of wood?" Emma giggled. "That's so old-fashioned. Grandpa, don't you know you can just buy stuff online now?" Monica gave me a forced smile. "That's sweet, Dad. Really thoughtful." But Todd couldn't hide his smirk. "You really spent all that time making that. Must have been a slow year." The laughter that followed stung more than I wanted to admit. I tried to smile, to make it seem like a joke, but my chest felt tight. "I thought you'd like something I made myself," I said quietly. "Something you could keep." Liam shrugged, tossing the toy aside to grab another gift, a drone from Todd. He didn't even look at me. The rest of my gifts met the same fate. Wooden puzzles, small figurines, a jewelry box I'd carved for Monica that she didn't even open. She just set it aside and thanked me politely, already turning to her husband to admire her new smartwatch. When the excitement died down, everyone returned to their screens. The TV played softly in the background, showing a Christmas movie I used to watch with my late wife, Eleanor. I sat there, my hands resting on my knees, the warmth of the fireplace unable to reach the cold settling inside me. After a while, I stood up quietly and started to gather the wrapping paper scattered around. No one noticed. Then Emma's voice cut through the room. "Mom, why does Grandpa always give us weird stuff? Like, what are we supposed to do with that old train?" Monica laughed softly. "Honey, he means well. It's just how he shows love." Todd chuckled. "Yeah, through sawdust and splinters." That was the moment I stopped trying to smile. I walked to the window and looked outside, snow falling slowly under the streetlight. I remembered Eleanor's laugh, her warm hands guiding mine when I first learned to carve. "Every mark you make with love," she used to say, "will outlast anything you could buy." I turned back to my family, who hadn't even noticed I'd moved. And in that moment, I realized something simple but painful. They didn't just forget what love looked like. They never learned. I stayed for another hour, mostly in silence. When it was finally time to go, Monica hugged me quickly, already distracted by her phone buzzing with notifications. "Drive safe, Dad," she said. "We'll call you next week, okay?" "Sure," I whispered. Outside, the night was quiet, except for the crunch of snow under my boots. I placed my bag in the passenger seat and started the engine, but didn't drive off immediately. Instead, I reached inside and pulled out one last gift. A small wooden angel I had carved for Eleanor's grave. I ran my thumb along its smooth edges and smiled faintly. They laughed at me again. Ellie, I murmured. But I think, maybe this year, it's time I stopped being the fool in their story. The engine rumbled softly. Snowflakes danced in the headlights as I drove into the cold night. Not broken, not bitter, but strangely calm. Because I already knew something they didn't. That laughter would cost them more than they could imagine. 3 days passed after Christmas, and the laughter from that night still echoed in my mind like a cruel chorus. The house was quiet now, too quiet. I sat in my worn armchair by the window, a cup of black coffee going cold in my hand, the snow outside melting into dirty slush. I kept replaying that moment in my head. Liam tossing aside the little wooden train, Monica forcing a smile, Todd's smug laugh. Every year I told myself it didn't matter. But this time, something inside me shifted. Eleanor's photo sat on the table beside me. I looked at her smiling face, the one I'd captured on our last Christmas together. She'd been holding a half-finished carving, her fingers covered in sawdust. "They'll understand one day," she had said, "even if it's too late." That morning, I made a promise to her photo. Maybe it's time they finally learn. Just then, my phone buzzed, a number I didn't recognize. I hesitated before answering. "Hello. Good morning. Is this Mr. Harold Finch?" A cheerful female voice asked. "Yes, speaking. This is Grace from the Pinewood Gazette. I'm calling about your work, your wooden carvings. Are you still selling pieces online?" I blinked. "Selling? Yes, sir. I came across your Etsy shop, Finchwood Crafts. I saw your handmade wooden train and some other toys listed. We'd love to feature your story in our Local Artists of Hope segment next week." For a moment, I couldn't find words. I had opened that little online shop months ago, more as a way to keep Eleanor's memory alive than to make money. I hadn't even checked it in weeks. "Oh, yes. I still do make them," I finally said. "That's wonderful. Would you be open to a short interview and photo session? Your pieces have gone viral on social media. People are calling them the art of a forgotten generation." I froze. Viral? After I hung up, I opened my laptop. The notifications were endless. Thousands of messages, hundreds of new orders. Someone had posted photos of my carvings online, the same kind I gave to my grandkids, praising their craftsmanship and emotional depth. One comment read, "This man's work feels alive. You can see love carved into every curve." Another said, "I'd pay anything for one of his pieces." My heart raced. It didn't make me proud, not yet. It made me sad, thinking of how the people closest to me couldn't see the value strangers saw instantly. Still, I packed a few of my best works in a box for the upcoming photo shoot. The little train like Liam's, the angel like Eleanor's, the puzzle box like Monica's. Each one felt like a quiet heartbeat from my past. 2 days later, a black SUV pulled up outside my small house. A woman with a camera stepped out, smiling warmly. "Mr. Finch? Grace, it's an honor to finally meet you." She spent an hour photographing my workshop, the tools, the shavings, the wood dust floating in golden morning light. She asked me about my inspiration, and I told her the truth. I carve because it's how I talk to the people I love, even when they've stopped listening. Grace paused, visibly moved. "That's beautiful, Mr. Finch. People need to hear that." When the article was published a week later, my world changed. The headline read, "The Grandfather Who Carves Memories. How One Man Turned Grief into Art." By the next morning, the story had spread across social media, shared thousands of times. Orders poured in from all over the country. Art galleries reached out. A collector even offered 5 figures for a single carving. But that wasn't what struck me the most. It was the call I received the following afternoon. "Dad," Monica's voice, hesitant, almost trembling. "Yes, honey," I replied evenly. I saw the article. Everyone's talking about you. The kids' friends showed them the story at school, and they realized the toys you made were yours. Like, really yours. They didn't know, Dad." I smiled faintly. "Didn't know what?" "That you were famous now. That people actually pay for those things." "I didn't make them for people who pay," I said softly. "I made them for people I love." Silence. Then, her voice cracked a little. "Dad, the kids feel awful. They want to apologize. Maybe we could come by this weekend?" I glanced at the pile of letters on my desk, handwritten notes from strangers thanking me for bringing warmth into their homes. "Of course," I said finally. You're welcome anytime. After we hung up, I sat there for a while, my heart heavy but calm. I didn't want revenge in the way most people think of it. I just wanted them to see. That evening, I walked into my workshop. The smell of pine and varnish filled the air. I picked up a half-finished carving, another little train, and started working. But this one wasn't for sale. I carved the initials slowly, carefully, into the base. L.J. from Grandpa, with patience. Outside, the snow began to fall again. And this time, it didn't feel so cold. It was a Saturday morning when I heard the tires crunching over the snow outside my house. The sound felt distant at first, part of the wind, maybe, until a faint knock echoed at my door. I set down my carving knife and wiped my hands on an old rag. Through the window, I saw Monica's SUV parked crookedly by the mailbox. They had come. I took a slow breath before opening the door. Monica stood there, her red coat bright against the gray sky, clutching a box of pastries like a peace offering. Liam and Emma lingered behind her, heads down, shifting awkwardly from foot to foot. Todd was nowhere to be seen. "Dad," she began softly. "Can we come in?" I nodded, stepping aside. "Of course. It's cold out there." Inside, the smell of sawdust mixed with the faint aroma of coffee and pine. My little living room looked nothing like their polished suburban home. Worn furniture, half-finished carvings on every surface, sunlight cutting through the curtains in quiet stripes. Liam looked around, curious for the first time. "This is where you make them?" he asked, pointing toward the workbench. "Yes," I said, a small smile tugging at my lips. "This is where everything comes to life." Monica set the pastry box on the table and hesitated before speaking. "Dad, we saw your story. It's all over the internet. Everyone's talking about your work." I didn't realize, she stopped, her eyes flickering to the photo of Eleanor on the shelf. "I didn't realize how much heart you put into those gifts." I poured coffee into 3 mismatched mugs and handed one to her. "It's not your fault you didn't see it," I said calmly. "It's hard to recognize love when you're expecting something else." Her eyes glistened. She looked older than I remembered, maybe from guilt, maybe from the years we'd both lost pretending everything was fine. Emma, who had been silent, finally whispered, "Grandpa, I'm sorry for laughing at your toy. My friends at school said they'd pay for something like that. I didn't know it was special." I knelt beside her. "You know what makes it special, sweetheart? Not the price. It's that it's made just for you. No one else has one like it." Liam shifted, embarrassed. "I still have mine," he said quickly. "Mom told me to throw it away, but I didn't. It's in my room." Monica's face flushed. "Liam," I raised a hand. "That's all right. I'm glad you kept it." For a moment, the room was quiet except for the crackle of the fireplace. I could feel the awkwardness between us, the space filled with all the words we never said. Then Monica broke it with a sigh. "Dad, I don't expect you to forgive us, but I want to make things right. We brought you something." She gestured to Liam, who went out to the car and returned with a large gift bag. Inside was a brand new carving tool set, expensive, professional-grade equipment, far beyond anything I'd ever owned. I ran my fingers over the polished handles. "It's beautiful," I said softly. "You deserve the best tools for your work," Monica said. "Maybe this can help you. Continue what you're doing." I looked at her for a long moment. "Monica, I never needed better tools," I said gently. "All I ever wanted was for you to believe in me, just once." Her lips trembled. "I do now." Emma sniffled, wiping her nose. "Grandpa, can you show us how to make something?" That question, innocent, simple, hit me harder than anything else that morning. I nodded, motioning them toward the workbench. We spent the next hour in near silence. I showed them how to sand the edges of a small wooden heart, how to smooth the grain with the palm of their hands, how to listen to the sound of the knife gliding through the wood. Liam carved his initials carefully, tongue between his teeth. Emma added a crooked little flower. And Monica just stood there, watching, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. When we finished, I held the heart up to the light. It wasn't perfect, not symmetrical, not polished, but it was honest. "Beautiful," I said quietly. "You see? Even when something looks broken, it can still hold meaning." Monica nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "Dad, I wish I'd realized that sooner." I smiled, the kind that comes from both sorrow and peace. "Most people do, sweetheart, but it's never too late." She stepped forward then, wrapping her arms around me. It wasn't a long hug, just enough to feel the warmth of something healing, something real. Before they left, Liam turned back at the door. Grandpa, yes. Can I keep this? He held up the small wooden heart. Of course, I said. Just remember, it's worth more than you think. They drove away slowly, the SUV disappearing down the snowy road. I watched from the porch until they were gone. For the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. I went back inside, the workshop quiet again. On the workbench sat the new carving tools they'd given me. I smiled faintly, running a finger along the handle of one. Maybe I would use it, not because I needed it, but because it came from something real. I turned to Eleanor's photo. You were right, Ellie, I whispered. They're learning. Outside, the snow kept falling, not heavy this time, just soft and slow, like forgiveness finding its way home. A month had passed since their visit. The snow outside had melted into patches of ice, and the first signs of spring crept timidly through the gray landscape. My workshop had grown busier than ever. Boxes of orders stacked near the door, envelopes filled with handwritten letters from strangers who said my carvings reminded them of their childhood, their parents, their lost loves. It was overwhelming, in a quiet sort of way. Every morning, I still brewed the same bitter coffee, still turned on the small radio, still sat in my old chair by the window. The fame hadn't changed much around me, only inside me. Then one morning, I got another call. Mr. Finch, this is Andrew Lewis from the Heartland Arts Foundation. We're organizing a charity auction for children's hospitals, and we'd be honored to feature one of your pieces. Mine? I asked, startled. Yes, sir. Your story has touched so many hearts. We'd love for you to donate one carving. Something personal, something meaningful. My eyes drifted to the workbench. There, under a cloth, sat the first toy I'd ever carved, a small wooden horse with a crooked leg. I'd made it for Eleanor when we were newly married, when I couldn't afford to buy her flowers. She had kept it on her dresser for 50 years. I swallowed hard. I think I know the one. 2 weeks later, I found myself standing in the grand hall of the Oak Ridge Hotel. Marble floors, chandeliers, and people dressed like they belonged to another world. I wore my best suit, the one Eleanor used to say made me look distinguished. The auction buzzed with energy. Paintings, sculptures, jewelry, and in the middle of it all, on a velvet-covered pedestal, was my wooden horse. It looked small, fragile, out of place among the luxury. But somehow it drew eyes. Monica had come too. She'd insisted, Dad, please, let us be there for you this time. She stood beside me now, nervous, humbled, different. The kids were formal clothes, fidgeting but quiet, their phones tucked away for once. When the auction began, the announcer's voice carried through the hall. Lot number 23. The wooden horse, handcrafted by local artist Harold Finch. Starting bid, $1,000. A murmur swept through the crowd. $1,000? I'd never imagined such a thing. 1,500, someone shouted. 2,000. 5. The numbers climbed, fast and steady. I tried to stay composed, but my hands trembled slightly. Monica gripped my arm. Dad, they're still going. 10,000. The room gasped. The auctioneer smiled broadly. 10,000, going once. 20. Another voice called. A woman near the front, eyes misty, her hand raised. The hammer came down. Sold. For $20,000. The applause was thunderous. Cameras flashed, but I barely heard any of it. My eyes were fixed on the wooden horse, now being lifted carefully into a glass case. That little carving, something born from love, loss, and my own 2 hands, had just done more good in a single night than I ever had in decades. Monica was crying. So was Emma. Even Liam looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Dad, Monica whispered, you just raised more money than half the donors in this room. I smiled faintly. It wasn't me. It was love that made it. After the auction, the woman who bought the piece approached me. Mr. Finch, she said gently, your story moved me. My husband passed away last year. He used to carve too. I wanted something that would remind me of him. Thank you for sharing your gift. I nodded, emotion tightening my throat. Thank you for giving it a new home. That night, as we drove home, the silence in the car was peaceful. No phones, no arguments, just quiet awe. The kids had fallen asleep in the back seat. Monica finally spoke. Dad, I think I spent too many years chasing the wrong kind of success. You built meaning with your hands. I just bought it with money. You were doing your best, I said softly. We all are. We just forget what truly matters until it's almost gone. She wiped a tear and smiled through it. You know, Liam told me he wants to learn woodworking now. He says he wants to make something that lasts. I chuckled quietly. Then he's already learned the most important part. When I got home, I sat in my workshop again, the moonlight spilling over my table. On the bench lay another carving I had been working on quietly for weeks, a replica of that same wooden horse. But this one wasn't for auction. It was for me. I turned it over and carved a few words into the base. For those who finally saw, I set it next to Eleanor's photo and smiled. She would have laughed at how the world had changed, how people now called me an artist, when all I ever wanted was to make something beautiful for the ones I loved. Outside, the night was still. The fame didn't matter, the money didn't matter. What mattered was that, after all the noise and laughter and years of distance, my family finally understood the sound of silence, the kind that heals. The fame settled into something quieter with time, less noise, more meaning. My story had made the rounds on television and online, then slowly drifted back into the place it belonged, the hearts of those who understood it. I kept carving, not for money or headlines, but because it felt like breathing. Each piece I made since the auction carried a little more peace, a little less sorrow. But one afternoon, as sunlight poured across the workshop floor, something unexpected arrived. It was a plain white envelope, handwritten in blue ink. The penmanship was rough, uneven, the kind that tries too hard to be neat. My heart gave a little jolt when I saw the return address. It was from Liam. I sat down at my desk, the letter trembling slightly in my hand. The last time I saw him, he'd fallen asleep in the car after the auction, his head resting against the window. I took a breath, unfolded the paper, and began to read. Dear Grandpa, I didn't know how to say this in person, so Mom said I could write instead. I'm sorry for the way I acted on Christmas. I didn't mean to make you feel bad. When I laughed at your gift, I thought it was just some old toy. I didn't know how much work and love went into it. I didn't know it was something you made with your heart. After the article came out, kids at school started showing pictures of your carvings. They said you were amazing. I got mad because I realized they saw something I didn't. You did all of that for us, and I just laughed. I still have the wooden train. It sits on my desk now. I keep looking at the letters you carved on the bottom. L. J. Grandpa loves you. I never noticed those before. I told Mom I want to visit again, but not for a short time. I want to stay for a few days. Maybe you can teach me how to carve, like you taught Grandma. I promise I'll listen this time. Love, Liam. I read it 3 times before I set it down. My eyes stung in the way they do when something good finally hurts less. I ran my fingers over the paper as though it were one of my carvings, feeling each imperfect groove of his handwriting. It wasn't just a letter. It was a bridge. That evening, I went out to the shed behind my house, the old one I hadn't opened in years. Dust filled the air as I pulled out a small workbench Eleanor once used when she helped me carve. I cleaned it, sanded it, and placed a fresh block of pine on top. When Liam came a week later, he arrived not with flashy gadgets or loud energy, but with a backpack full of notebooks and a shy smile. Hi, Grandpa, he said, his voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. Hey there, partner, I said, grinning. Ready to get your hands dirty? He nodded, eyes bright with curiosity. For the next few days, we worked side by side. He learned how to hold a knife properly, how to follow the grain, how to feel when the wood talks back. He cut his finger once, nothing serious. But instead of whining, he just laughed. Guess it's part of the job, huh? I nodded. Every scar tells a story. Just make sure it's a good one. We talked about everything, school, his dreams, even his fights with his mom. But what stuck with me most was what he said on the last night before he left. You know, Grandpa, he said, holding up the little bird he'd carved. This doesn't look perfect. The wing's weird, and the beak's too long. I smiled. You think my first one was any better? He laughed. Probably. I put a hand on his shoulder. The trick isn't to make it perfect. The trick is to make it yours. That's what makes it last. He nodded slowly, understanding in that way only a child can, pure and real. When Monica came to pick him up, she hugged me tighter than before. Dad, she said softly, I think you've done more for Liam in 3 days than we've managed in months. I shook my head. All I did was show him the quiet. As their car disappeared down the road, I looked around the workshop. On the bench sat Liam's little bird, uneven, slightly cracked, but beautiful. I didn't fix it. I just varnished it gently and placed it on the shelf beside my own first carving. Two imperfect creations, side by side. That night, I sat by Eleanor's photo again. He's learning, Ellie, I whispered. And maybe so am I. I thought about how laughter had once broken me, and how silence had healed me. Now, a single letter had done what all the noise never could. It reminded me I wasn't forgotten. The weeks after Liam's visit were some of the calmest of my life. The workshop had never felt more alive. Wood shavings dusted the floor like snow, and the smell of varnish mixed with coffee every morning. Letters still arrived, but I didn't chase the spotlight anymore. I was happy carving in silence, knowing the right people now understood what these pieces meant. Then one morning, I got a call that disturbed that peace. Mr. Finch. The voice on the other end was smooth, confident, the kind of tone that always means business. This is Daniel Cooper from Heritage Crafts Incorporated. We've been following your story. Your name is everywhere. Online, in the art world, in retail circles. You're something of a legend now. I chuckled softly. A legend, huh? That's new. Daniel laughed politely. We'd like to make you an offer, sir. We specialize in artisan brand partnerships. We could mass-produce your designs, wooden toys, jewelry boxes, ornaments, all under your name. You'd receive royalties, of course. We're talking about 6 figures annually, maybe more. 6 figures. I had to sit down. He continued, we'd keep the Harold Finch legacy alive, make it accessible to the whole country. You'd be inspiring families everywhere. It sounded noble. Too noble. I appreciate it, I said slowly. But something tells me your factories don't smell like pine and coffee. He laughed again, not catching the edge in my voice. We'd handle the production, the marketing, everything. You'd just lend your name and maybe design a few prototypes. Think of it as turning your art into history. I thanked him and told him I'd think about it. But when I hung up, my stomach was heavy. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at my workbench, turning one of Liam's carvings, the little crooked bird, in my hands. Eleanor's photo watched me from the shelf. I could almost hear her teasing voice. You always said love couldn't be mass-produced. The thought made me smile, then ache. The next morning, I drove to Monica's house. It had been months since the awkward Christmas that started everything. She greeted me with genuine warmth this time. No champagne glass in hand, no forced smile. Dad, she said, hugging me. What a surprise. I told her about the call, about the offer. Her eyes widened. 6 figures? Dad, that's life-changing. You could buy a new place, hire help, maybe even. I raised a hand gently. Monica. She stopped. I didn't start carving to make a fortune. I started because I missed your mother's laughter. Because love had nowhere else to go. Monica bit her lip, her eyes glistening. I know, Dad. I don't want you to struggle. I'm not struggling, I said softly. For the first time in a long while, I'm exactly where I belong. Liam, who'd been sitting at the kitchen table doing homework, looked up. Grandpa, are you going to say no? I smiled at him. What do you think I should do? He thought for a moment. If they make your toys in a big factory, they won't be special anymore. That's right, I said. They'll be copies. And love doesn't work that way. He nodded solemnly, as if he already understood more about the world than most grown men. That night, back home, I called Daniel. Mr. Cooper, I said calmly, I've thought about your offer. Wonderful. We're ready to draft the paperwork. I'm afraid I'll have to decline. Silence. Then confusion. Decline? Mr. Finch, this is an incredible opportunity. You'll reach millions. I already have, I interrupted gently. Just not the way you think. You see, what makes my work valuable isn't the wood or the tools. It's the hands that make it and the heart behind it. You can't sell that. He sighed, switching to his corporate tone. You're making a mistake. Maybe, I said, but at least it's mine. And with that, I hung up. A few days later, Monica came to visit again. She had something in her hands, a small plaque, carefully engraved. I made this for you, she said, smiling shyly. It's not much, but I wanted you to have it. I turned it over and read the words. Authenticity isn't about money, it's about meaning. She laughed softly. Liam helped me pick the quote. I placed it on the shelf beside Eleanor's photo. You're both learning, I said warmly. That's worth more than any check. Monica smiled, but her voice cracked a little. Dad, you know, when I was younger, you always seemed so quiet. I thought you didn't care about things like success. But now I see, you just had a different definition of it. Success, I said, is when the people you love finally understand you before it's too late. She hugged me again, this time with tears. Later that night, I went outside. The air was cool, crisp, full of stars. I looked down at my hands. Rough, scarred, steady. These hands had built love from wood, silence from noise, forgiveness from pain. I walked back into the workshop and pulled out a fresh block of oak. I didn't know what I'd carve next, but I knew it would mean something. Maybe a bird, maybe a train, maybe just a heart. Whatever it was, it would be mine. Not for sale, not for show, just a quiet truth carved in wood. A year slipped by faster than I could have imagined. The days were quieter now, steady, meaningful, simple. The world had moved on from my story, as it always does, but I hadn't. I didn't need it to. I spent the year carving slowly, teaching Liam whenever he came by on weekends. Sometimes Emma joined, still shy but curious, sanding the edges of whatever he made. Monica would sit nearby, sipping coffee, smiling softly as if afraid to disturb the peace that had finally settled between us. By December, the air smelled of pine again. The snow came early that year. Thick, heavy flakes that blanketed the ground like forgiveness. One evening, as I sat by the window, whittling the final touches on a wooden nativity scene, the phone rang. "Dad," Monica said, her voice trembling with warmth. "We're having Christmas at your place this year. You don't get to say no." I laughed. "That's quite a change. Let's just call it tradition coming full circle." They arrived on Christmas Eve. This time, there were no loud carols, no forced smiles, no flashing cameras. Just quiet laughter, the kind that grows naturally between people who've learned something hard and important. Monica brought food, simple, homemade dishes that actually smelled like Christmas instead of store-bought perfection. Liam carried a box wrapped in newspaper, and Emma followed with something behind her back, grinning mischievously. I greeted them with open arms. The house was small, but it was warm, the kind of warmth that came from more than just the fireplace. "Grandpa," Liam said, placing the box on the table, "we made something for you." I raised an eyebrow. "Made, huh?" He nodded eagerly. "I did most of it, but Mom and Emma helped." I unwrapped it slowly, and when the paper fell away, my throat tightened. Inside was a wooden carving, a family of 4 figures standing beneath a carved pine tree. It wasn't perfect. The proportions were off, the edges rough, and the polish uneven. But it was beautiful, painfully, honestly beautiful. The base had a small engraving. "For the man who taught us what real gifts are." For a moment, I couldn't speak. My hands trembled as I traced the carving's surface. The wood was different from what I usually used, lighter, younger, but it carried the same spirit. Liam did the shaping, Monica said softly. Emma sanded. Well, I tried not to ruin it. Emma giggled. "You almost did, Mom." We all laughed, and it felt like something had lifted from the room, the last bit of weight that had lingered for too long. I looked at the carving again, then at them. "I used to think Christmas was about giving," I said quietly. "But now I think it's about understanding. And you've given me that." Monica wiped her eyes. "You gave it to us first, Dad." The silence that followed wasn't awkward anymore. It was peaceful, the kind that means everything's finally been said, even if no one's talking. After dinner, I surprised them with something too. I walked to my workbench and pulled out 3 small boxes, each tied with a red string. "Before you open them," I said, "just remember, they're not perfect either." Liam went first. Inside his box was a small bird, a replica of the one he'd carved last year, but refined, symmetrical, wings spread mid-flight. On the base, I'd engraved, "Patience made you fly." He looked at it like it was made of gold. Emma opened hers next. It was a little music box, shaped like a star. When she turned the handle, a soft tune played, "Silent Night." She gasped, then threw her arms around me. And Monica's gift. Hers was simple, a wooden heart, smooth and polished, with the words burned into it. "You finally heard me." Her lips trembled as she pressed it to her chest. "I did, Dad. I really did." Later that night, after everyone had fallen asleep, Liam and Emma curled up on the couch, Monica dozing in the armchair. I sat by the window with a cup of tea. Outside, the snow was still falling, just like last year. But this time, it didn't feel like loneliness pressing against the glass. It felt like peace. I looked at the little family carving they'd made for me. sitting on the mantel beside Eleanor's photo. The two seemed to belong together, her smile watching over their gift. I spoke softly, almost afraid to break the moment. You were right, Ellie. They learned, not from my words, but from my silence. The clock ticked softly in the background. The fire crackled. And in that small, humble home, I realized something profound. Revenge hadn't been my story's ending. Redemption had. Spring came quietly that year, melting the snow in gentle whispers. The frost on the windows gave way to sunlight, and the trees behind my house began to bud again. For the first time in many years, I didn't dread the empty mornings. I welcomed them. The workshop, once a lonely refuge, had turned into something new. Life had found its way back in, one carving at a time. The laughter that once haunted me now echoed there again. Softer, younger, lighter. It started with Liam, of course. He brought two of his friends one weekend to learn from Grandpa. I thought they'd lose interest after an hour. Instead, they stayed the whole day, covered in sawdust and wonder. By summer, I had half a dozen kids from the neighborhood coming by every Saturday. Some were quiet, some restless, some carried eyes too old for their age, but they all found something in the wood that spoke to them. I didn't call it a class. I called it listening. Don't fight the wood, I'd tell them, guiding small hands over rough grain. Let it tell you what it wants to become. Sometimes they'd laugh, thinking I was joking. But after a while, they started to understand, the same way I once did. Monica came by often, too. She'd bring sandwiches and lemonade, sometimes just to sit and watch. You've turned this place into a school, she said one day, smiling. Not a school, I corrected. A reminder. A reminder of what? That everything, even love, needs patience to take shape. She smiled, her eyes soft. You know, Dad, you used to be quiet all the time. I thought it was because you didn't have much to say. Now I see it was because you were teaching all along. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just squeezed her hand. One Saturday, as the kids packed up to leave, a small girl named Rosie lingered behind. She was maybe 9, freckles scattered across her nose, hair tied in 2 messy braids. Mr. Finch, she said shyly, holding up her carving, a little wooden cat with one ear shorter than the other. It's not perfect. I smiled. That's what makes it special. You gave it character. She frowned, studying it. My mom says nothing broken can be beautiful. I knelt down beside her. Then she's never seen a heart put back together. Her eyes widened. That moment when a child hears truth and doesn't quite know what to do with it. She hugged me suddenly, quick and fierce. Thank you, Mr. Finch. When she ran off, I stayed kneeling there for a moment, staring at the small wooden cat in my hand. My chest ached, but not from sadness, from fullness. That evening, after everyone left, I walked around the workshop, touching the carvings left behind. Animals, trees, shapes that didn't make sense, but somehow still meant something. The air smelled of sawdust and sunlight, and the light through the windows looked almost golden. I turned toward Eleanor's photo. The setting sun caught the glass, and for a second, her reflection shimmered as if she were standing there, watching. You'd like this, Ellie, I said softly. The kids, they get it. They feel it. The light flickered, warm and alive. Maybe it was just the sun. Maybe not. I walked over to the shelf and picked up the wooden horse, the one that had started everything. The crooked leg was still there, the same flaw that once embarrassed me. Now, I couldn't imagine it any other way. I placed it on the workbench and whispered, everything broken still carries beauty, if you let it. The air felt different, not heavy, not sad, just present, like she was listening. Later that night, I sat outside on the porch, a blanket around my shoulders, watching the stars blink awake one by one. The crickets hummed in rhythm with the faint ticking of the old clock inside. From the open window came faint laughter, Monica and the kids finishing the dishes, music playing softly. The home that once echoed with silence now breathed again. I thought about that first Christmas, the laughter that cut me like a knife, the loneliness that followed. I thought about how I'd mistaken silence for defeat, when it had been the beginning of something far deeper. Revenge had never been about making them suffer. It had been about making them see. And now they did. I smiled into the night, whispering to no one and everyone at once. You were right, Ellie. Love doesn't shout. It carves itself quietly, into hearts, into wood, into time. The wind brushed softly through the trees, almost like a reply. And as I closed my eyes, I realized something I'd waited a lifetime to understand. The greatest revenge isn't anger or punishment. It's peace. It happened on a Friday night, the kind of night when the air feels too still, like the world is holding its breath. I'd been finishing a small carving, a pair of hands folded in prayer, when I noticed the wind shifting. The chimes on my porch began to sing, sharp and nervous. By the time I stepped outside, the sky had turned heavy and dark. Clouds rolled in from the west like a wave swallowing the horizon. I could smell the rain before I saw it. Storm's coming, I murmured to myself, glancing back at the workshop, my sanctuary, my heartbeat. I double-checked the windows, made sure the tools were covered, the door latched. But when the first thunder cracked, it sounded like the earth itself splitting open. Within minutes, the wind roared. Trees bent and moaned, branches snapping like old bones. I stood by the window, watching helplessly as the storm tore across my yard. Then a flash of lightning illuminated the workshop, my workshop, and I saw the roof beginning to lift. No, I whispered, my heart pounding. The next strike came louder, closer. The wind howled like something alive. I threw on my coat and ran outside, rain pelting my face, stinging cold against my skin. By the time I reached the workshop, half the roof was gone. Sheets of metal flapped violently, and water poured through the cracks. The scent of wet wood and varnish filled the air. I tried to pull the door open, but it resisted, jammed tight from the swelling wood. Come on, I shouted over the wind, shoving with my shoulder until it gave way. Inside, chaos. The shelves had toppled. My tools were scattered across the floor. Some of the kids' carvings lay in puddles, their little creatures soaked and broken. And there, on the workbench, the wooden horse, the first carving, the one that had started everything, trembled as the wind rushed in through the broken roof. I grabbed it just as another burst of wind slammed the door shut behind me. My knees gave out, and I sat there in the middle of the wreckage, clutching the horse like it was something alive. I whispered to Eleanor's photo, which had fallen face down on the floor. Not this. Please, not this. Lightning flashed again, and for a moment I thought I saw her reflection in the broken glass. Not sad, not afraid, just calm. The storm outside screamed, but inside, something inside me went still. I realized then that this, all of this, wasn't about what I could keep. It was about what I'd already given. I stood up slowly, gripping the carving in my hand, and looked around the workshop one last time. You've done your part, I whispered. You've told the story. Then I left, closing the door behind me, even as the walls rattled and groaned. By morning, the storm was gone. The sky was clear, painted in soft pinks and golds. But my workshop was half collapsed, the roof torn away, the windows shattered. When Monica arrived, she gasped. Dad, oh my God. I held up a hand gently. I'm fine. Just a little storm. A little? Dad, everything's destroyed. She stepped inside, eyes filling with tears as she saw the mess. All your work. I shook my head. Not all of it. From my pocket, I pulled out the wooden horse, still damp, still chipped, but safe. Liam appeared behind her, his face pale. Grandpa will fix it. I'll help you rebuild everything. I smiled. No, Liam. You'll build something new. I think it's your turn now. He stared at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Then I want to start today. Monica knelt beside me, placing a hand on my shoulder. We'll rebuild, Dad. As a family, we owe this place everything. I looked around at the wreckage, sunlight pouring through the broken roof, turning the wet floorboards into gold. You don't owe it anything, I said quietly. It already gave us what we needed. The next few weeks were a blur of work and healing. Neighbors came to help clear the debris. Some of my students, the little ones, brought their parents to help too. They said the workshop had meant something to them, that they wanted to see it live again. And slowly, piece by piece, it did. But this time, it wasn't my workshop anymore. It was ours. The new sign above the door, carved by Liam himself, read, Finch and Friends Woodworks, where love is handcrafted. Every Saturday, the place filled with laughter, the soft scrape of blades, and the smell of pine. The world hadn't ended in that storm. It had started again, just differently. One afternoon, as I sat in a chair outside, watching the kids work inside, Monica brought me tea and said, You know, Dad, that storm might have been the best thing that ever happened to us. I smiled, nodding toward the sunlight streaming through the workshop windows. Sometimes things have to break before the light can get in. She leaned her head on my shoulder, and we sat there in silence, listening to the rhythm of hammers and laughter echoing through the open door. I looked up at the sky, wide, clear, forgiving, and whispered to the wind, "Thank you, Ellie. You've been watching over us the whole time, haven't you?" The chimes on the porch swayed softly in reply. And for the first time in my long life, I didn't just feel at peace. I felt complete. Winter returned quietly that year, soft, patient, almost gentle. The trees behind my house stood bare again, the air filled with that faint scent of frost and wood smoke that always carried memories. It had been almost 2 years since the laughter that started it all. The world had changed, and so had I. The workshop was alive every weekend now. Liam teaching the younger kids, Monica handling letters and donations, Emma painting little designs on the finished toys. It was no longer mine alone. It belonged to everyone who had ever walked through those doors with an open heart. But in the quiet hours of the evening, when the saws stopped humming and the laughter faded into silence, I still carved for myself, slow, deliberate, peaceful. And one night, as snow began to fall outside again, I decided to make one last piece. Not for sale, not for show, not even for the family. For her. I found a piece of what I'd been saving for years, smooth, pale maple, the kind Eleanor loved. I set it on the bench and lit the old lamp beside me. The familiar smell of sawdust filled the air, mixing with the faint aroma of tea. As I began to carve, my hands trembled slightly. Not from weakness, from emotion. Each cut, each curve, each soft whisper of the knife carried something from inside me. The years, the pain, the love, the forgiveness. Hours passed. The world outside disappeared. The snow thickened, muting every sound but the soft scrape of the blade. When I was done, I sat back and looked at what I'd made. A small wooden angel, delicate and simple. Her hands were folded in prayer, her eyes closed, wings curved gently as if caught in motion. I smiled. "You always wanted one like this, didn't you, Ellie?" On the base, I burned a small inscription with my shaky hand. "For the love that taught me silence." I ran my thumb over the words, feeling the warmth of the wood beneath my skin. And for the first time in decades, I didn't feel alone in that room. The next morning, Monica found me sitting by the window, wrapped in my blanket, the angel resting on the table beside me. The workshop key was in my hand. "Dad," she said softly, "you're up early." I smiled. "Just watching the snow. Looks like another good year for carving." She laughed quietly, pouring me coffee. "You never stop, do you?" "Not until I'm finished," I said. She didn't understand then, but she would. Later that week, I asked Monica and the kids to meet me in the workshop. They gathered around the table, curious. "I've been thinking," I began. "This place, it's no longer just mine. It's yours now, all of you. Every laugh, every carving, every story that finds its way here." Liam frowned. "Grandpa, are you saying?" I raised a hand. "I'm saying it's time. You've all learned what this place is really about. It's not about wood or tools. It's about remembering what matters when the noise fades away." I placed the angel in Monica's hands. "Keep her safe. She's the last thing I'll ever make." Tears welled in her eyes. "Dad, she's beautiful." Emma whispered, "It looks like Grandma." I smiled faintly. "That's because it is her." Liam stood quietly, his jaw tight, eyes glistening. "We'll take care of it, Grandpa. I promise." "I know you will," I said, resting my hand on his shoulder. "Just promise me one thing, that you'll never rush what deserves to take time." He nodded, swallowing hard. "I won't." That night, after they left, I stayed in the workshop a little longer. The fire in the stove burned low, casting long golden shadows across the walls. I walked around slowly, touching each carving one last time. The bird Liam made, still uneven but proud. The family carving they'd given me last Christmas. The wooden horse, old, cracked, eternal. Each one was a chapter. Each one was a heartbeat. I placed my hand over my chest and whispered, "You were right, Ellie. They learned. And now, I can rest." The wind outside was soft that night, brushing gently against the windows like a lullaby. When the morning came, Monica arrived early to bring me breakfast. She found the door to the workshop open, the fire still warm. On the workbench sat the angel, the key beside it, and a note written in careful, familiar handwriting. Asterisk, everything I ever needed to say, I've already carved into this place. Don't grieve for what ends. Cherish what begins. Love. Harold. Asterisk. She held the note to her chest, tears streaming silently down her face. Liam stepped beside her, his hand gripping the edge of the table. Grandpa finished his last gift, he whispered. Months later, the workshop stayed open, brighter than ever. Liam ran it full-time now, teaching new generations the same lessons his grandfather taught him. The angel stayed on the mantel beside Eleanor's photo, her wooden wings forever spread toward the light. Every visitor, every student, every child who walked through those doors saw her first. They'd ask who made her, and Liam would always smile and say, "A man who learned that silence can speak louder than words. And that love, when carved with patience, never dies." And every time the wind passed through the old porch chimes, it sounded like a whisper of laughter, faint, familiar, eternal.